Welcome into a Wednesday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod, presented by our new sponsor, SmartBracket. If you've listened to this pod for the last couple of years, you've heard about SmartBracket before. They usually jump on board around this time of year, and that's because March Madness just around the corner. Selection Sunday is like 3 days away, Brandon. I'm fired up for that. But before we dive into the madness, we want to loop you in on one of our sponsors, Supported Intelligence. They've developed an AI tool called SmartBracket.io that could really help when you're building your brackets this year. Think of SmartBracket as that one friend who always has the inside scoop, thanks to something they call rapid recursive technology. It's like having a secret playbook for your March Madness picks, making your bracket a bit smarter while saving you a ton of time. If you love the game and your bracket could use a bit of an edge or a full-on strategy overhaul, SmartBracket.io is worth a peek. It's fun and easy to use while leveraging some brilliant AI technology. Might just give you those bragging rights you're after in your bracket pool. With March Madness around the corner, a little extra insight never hurt. When Selection Sunday starts, check out smartbracket.io. Here's to enjoying the madness and making smarter choices along the way. Thank you, Supported Intelligence. Brandon, we don't have many ad reads that end with a thank you to the AI community, but I'm here for it.
I've been leaning more into AI recently. I use, of the last couple of weeks, I've been using ChatGPT for so many odds and ends sort of things. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I'm almost positive my wife doesn't listen to an NBA fantasy podcast. Our anniversary, our seventh, maybe. Our seventh wedding anniversary was the other day. I'm sitting there, and we've all had this moment. You sit there with a birthday card or an anniversary card, and you're not having that spark of inspiration of what do I write? I actually chat GPT'd it, or you say nice things to say in an anniversary card. And I didn't copy it, but just gives you a couple of thought starters. So if we can use this now for that, we can use it to fill out brackets. There's no limits here. So rather than being afraid of it, Nick, I am leaning right into it.
Okay.
Even in my love life.
Fair enough. Let's, what do you say we talk some basketball, Brandon?
Okay.
We had 7 games in the NBA last night. We'll do some recapping there. We got a big Wednesday slate coming at us. You already submitted your PrizePicks for tonight, so really excited about that. We're going on week 3 now of Brandon handing out a couple of PrizePicks. Want to push everybody to rotowire.com/picks. Really great hub, hugely popular area on our site where you could get insights on just about any type of prop you may want to throw down. And, PrizePicks, that's usually what we recommend most. You can sleeper, underdog, even helps you if you want to do traditional, prop betting over at DraftKings or FanDuel or BetMGM, wherever. So you've been using that tool, Brandon. Where did you go last night? How did it go? And where are we looking forward tonight?
Last night was sort of a disaster. The last 2 days have not been good. I've hit a 2-day cold spell. I usually at least go 1-1. I got a little hot at the end of last week, and I've cooled right off. I was on Dante DiVincenzo. At the over, and the Knicks played great, but they just didn't need him to have an amazing game. And then I stayed in that same game. Tobias Harris for more than 6.5 rebounds. I think he finished with about 3. The 76ers couldn't do anything well. So let's move on past that. Let me also promote what I love using because I go through my prop selection. I've told you I kind of Ouija board it. I let the board come to me, and then I'll go to RotoWire and see, does my opinion align with what the projection – I don't want to just blindly go into the projection tool, but I use it as sort of like it makes me feel more assured that I'm on the right track. Austin Reeves, more than 24.5 PRA, points, rebounds, and assists tonight. I went and looked at that at the projection tool. Not only does it tell you what he has hit on that mark throughout the course of the season, it tells you what he's done in the last 10 games. It tells you if he's hit that in the percentages of the last 20 games against that specific opponent. You know how long this research would take me if I didn't have this projection tool? And it just does it for me. So I'm able to spit this stuff out a lot faster. 70% of the time, he has gone over 24.5 PRA in the last 20 games. I love that. And he's hit it in his last 5. And then the other one, hometown guy, Jalen Suggs back in the lineup. The Magic need some offensive juice. 1.5 threes is his projected total, so we're going to take him for more than that. So those are the 2 picks tonight. I feel really good about it. I think we're getting back to our winning ways tonight.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. A lot of good data there, a lot of good explanations. I'm feeling confident. You talked me into it in like 2 minutes. And again, go check out rotowire.com/picks, whatever site you play on, whatever book, whatever pick'em site. We got a ton of information there. And if nothing else, it's a research tool. I wouldn't recommend just, blindly doing whatever the picks tool recommends. You want to get your own input in there, but especially on a night like tonight, Brandon, when you got 9 games on the NBA slate, I pull up PrizePicks or I pull up the book. And it's like, man, where do I even begin? And that's really what I use RotoWire picks for most, is to just like, all right, this will at least give me a batch of players or a group of games, that seem to kind of trigger some alarms, as far as where the value may be.
And I'm one of the things. Sorry, I just want to break in because one of the things that I look for, and I don't follow this discipline to a T every day, because we're giving out these picks every single day, and sometimes you end up getting caught up trying to latch on to a streak where a guy is. Luka Doncic is a good example where he had 6 straight 30-point triple doubles. So I took his over for his PRA the other day at 54.5. He had a 20-point triple double, and he still didn't hit it. So sometimes it can be it's tough when you try and hop onto a moving train. I'm back to the basics today, and one of my more consistent disciplines is to hop on players or teams that need the bounce back. The Lakers have not beaten the Sacramento Kings yet this season, so they're going to be extra locked in. The Magic haven't scored 100 points in back-to-back games. They have no offense, and so where are they going to get it from tonight? So some of those sort of disciplines of not just trying to hop on the moving train, but actually trying to catch the bounce back before it happens.
Yeah, Lakers need it. Kings coming in on the second night of a back-to-back. They have been terrible in these situations, 3-7 against the spread on the second night of back-to-backs this season. What I was going to bring up before was Sacramento just whipping the Milwaukee Bucks last night. And, I was on Damian Lillard, with some player props and DFS last night. I thought he had really seemingly flipped the switch. Since the All-Star break, he was averaging like 4 made threes per game, 25 points. He was coming off a back-to-back, 2010 double-doubles. Giannis had played well. And this was one of those games, Brandon, where it reminded me of the first 40 games of the year, where it's like, if you don't know who Damian Lillard is, you're watching this game, and he looked like just another guy. 2 of 12 shooting, is very, very passive. Some of the shots were kind of forced end of the shot clock situations. It didn't help that Milwaukee had an ultra-cold shooting night overall. Malik Beasley missed like 7 wide open corner threes. At one point, Sacramento, I think in the first half, was plus 24 from beyond the arc in terms of points off a 3-pointer. So I think you chalk this up to just kind of an off night for a few guys from Milwaukee. Obviously, they still don't have Chris Middleton back, but then you look at the bench scoring, right? And it's like you get absolutely nothing from Jay Crowder, who started on the wing. Bobby Portis, 11 points in 21 minutes. That's fine. Pat Connaughton, 2 of 9. AJ Green, 1 of 6. Patrick Beverley, 1 of 4. He got banged up in this game. Like, I know getting Chris Middleton back, if he is peak Chris Middleton, that's a huge if. But if he's peak Chris Middleton, that solves a lot of Milwaukee's problems. I still feel like, there's going to be times in a playoff series, not even talking like Eastern Finals. I think this is something that could affect them early on, where we look and say, man, they just feel like they're still a guy short.
It should not ever happen where you have Giannis and Damian Lillard sharing a basketball court and you can't get to 100 points. How does that even happen? And not only did it happen last night, you could go, okay, we'll chalk it up to they just had a bad night. They had an off night.
They've done that twice. 3.
They've done it twice in the last 4 games. They're 1-3 in their last 4, and in 2 of those games, they've scored 94 or less. I don't understand how you have this collection of talent. There's still something, even though they've put it together enough times for us to go, okay, they're Milwaukee. They still have one of the best players in the world, and they have these games or these stretches throughout the season where their chemistry isn't there, and it still feels like it hasn't gelled properly. Damian Lillard, I mean, I thought the All-Star break was exactly what he needed. and not just the break, but the way that he performed, and it reinserted some confidence. Patrick Beverley telling him he's the man and all of that good stuff. I just don't think he's the same guy anymore. And so they're really going to have to cross their fingers and hope that he can put it together long enough to take this team deep through the Eastern Conference playoffs, because they feel like one of those teams that will be the higher seed, and everybody's going to want to take the underdog because we just don't trust Milwaukee.
Lillard not being the same guy, or being even a slightly diminished version of the guy he's been for his entire career, is obviously a disaster scenario for Milwaukee, because this is not like LeBron and Wade trying to figure it out first year in Miami. And you're like, all right, well, they didn't win the title in 2011, but they'll be back. They'll figure this out. And they did. It's like, if Lillard's not himself this year, it's not going to get better going forward, right? It's like he's not going to probably reverse that trend as he goes closer into his mid-30s. So it's very concerning for Milwaukee. I don't think we need to do any revisionism on the trade. I still think it was something the Bucks had to do at that time. And again, I think you can't really overstate how big of a deal it is to be without Chris Middleton for seemingly half of the season. And, even the games that he's played, a lot of those he's been limited. I know outside of Milwaukee, maybe that doesn't feel like that big of a deal, but the depth that they sacrificed to bring in Lillard, it's like you're planning on Chris Middleton being out there. And I do think we see a different version of this team when he's back. That could be within the next few days, by the way. He was initially listed as questionable for last night's game. So I do think they get Middleton back in the mix soon enough, and that probably changes things. But, does that push them over the top? Is that the piece that makes you feel good about them, winning a 7-game series on the road at Boston? For me, probably not, and even if you were to get to the NBA finals, then it's Denver, it's the Clippers, it's whoever. It's hard to feel confident in this team. At the same time, Brandon, this whole year has felt like train wreck is very strong, but it hasn't gone like we thought it would, and the Bucks are still sitting in second in the East, right? So I think that's what you can fall back on. This has felt like this hugely disappointing season, and yet they're kind of where we thought they would be.
Yeah, but we see the weaknesses there. They have enough talent to win regular season. There's a lot of bad teams in the NBA. They have enough talent to just go out and win games in the regular season. But we are seeing warts that are going to show and present themselves in the playoffs. So I think we, as NBA fans, are savvy enough to see right through the overall record. This team is not built to be the second seed. They're built to make it to the finals. And the thing with that, obviously, it's not a direct comparison because that Heat team was like one of the best ever assembled. They still made it to the finals the first year in what felt like a really disappointing debut of the Big Three. Would you agree that if Milwaukee just makes it to that point, this has been a win? If they get to the finals and lose in the finals, they're good. That was not the case with Miami. Miami had to win or it was a failure. That's how that was built. I think, Milwaukee would be disappointed, but if Milwaukee makes it past Boston and whoever in the Eastern Conference and then they lose to the Nuggets in the finals, I think you can go, okay, that was a pretty good season. This was a win for Milwaukee this year.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, obviously the Bucks and Giannis would tell you if they lose the finals, that's not what they wanted. But I think given where we are right now, if Milwaukee just makes the finals and, if they lose in 6 games to Denver, you're not going to be like, oh man, this was a total disaster. Yeah. Getting to the finals at this point, I think just emerging from the East, that would be huge. I think the difference between that and 2011 is that the Heat were like minus 200 to win that series, right? It's like, not only did they get there, it's like, it felt like getting through the East was maybe going to be their toughest challenge. I think you could argue, of all the teams that LeBron has faced in the finals in his career, it's like that might have been the most winnable series he had, right? I mean, obviously it was a great Mavericks team. It wasn't an all-time team. It wasn't a team that people circled and said, yeah, that's the team to beat this year. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, we're going to look either smart or foolish 2 months from now. Milwaukee's either going to bow out in round 2, or maybe they do make the finals. It wouldn't be that surprising whatsoever. But yeah, some of the underlying metrics for Milwaukee, they've been better since the break. But then, these games like last night, it felt like, in years past, the Bucks just they don't just go and lose by 35, on the road in Sacramento. Like the down games for Milwaukee to me have been a little bit more extreme this season. I do want to note something. You mentioned Milwaukee failing to get to 100 points, which they've done the last couple of weeks. I'm sure you've seen the narrative, going around that there's been some whispers that maybe the NBA, I think using the All-Star game as a catalyst. I think that was the final straw for Adam Silver. Smart people that I've heard from, have said that it's the refereeing maybe has tightened up a little bit, and that would explain why we've seen so many lower scoring games of late. And, I think it's easy to look at the extremes like that 79-73 Knicks Sixers game this past Sunday. But scoring in general is down significantly since the All-Star break. Like the average team pre-All-Star break was averaging about 115 points per game, just short of 115 points per game. Post All-Star break, league average is sitting at about 111. That's a pretty huge drop over the course of like a month.
Yeah, what I don't know is one of those things that I would love to see. What does this look like every year? Because I feel like this happens every season. You get past the All-Star break, some teams are giving up. Other teams that are good, like Milwaukee, Milwaukee, Boston, these top teams that know that their real season is about to start in a month, they're like ready to get on with it. And so you only have a few teams that are really putting their best foot forward, that care about these games like they're big games. And even those teams, they're dog tired at this point. All of these back-to-backs, 3 games in 4 nights. I think the season just catches up with you. That would be my assessment, is not so much an officials thing, but just an exhaustion of the season. And kind of like the dog days in the summer of baseball where you're like, is this ever going to end? That I get the feeling that these players are sort of in that mode. But in order to back that up, I would have to look at what happens post All-Star break over the last several seasons.
Well, I will say, average free throw attempts per game are also down by about 3 free throw attempts per game per team. So that would, there may be something there. But yeah, I don't think the NBA. So
what is that? Like an email from Adam Silver that he sends out during the All-Star break? Like, hey guys, ease up on those whistles.
Yeah, well, Milwaukee took 35 free throws last night, so it's case by case. But it is interesting that we've had 5 games where a team has scored 80 or fewer points this year, and they've all come in the last 2+ weeks, which is something to monitor, something to keep an eye on. We're not seeing as many of those.
I've watched about 4 of those. They're ugly.
Yeah, well, Orlando is involved in a couple of them. Portland has been a culprit as well. Let's talk Rockets Spurs. Another big night for Victor Wembanyama, relatively big. This actually goes down as like an off night for him, and he still has a double-double with 6 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. But I think the Houston side of this is more interesting because we really had no sample of what this rotation would look like without Sengun. He'd only missed 1 game all season prior to last night. Rockets end up going with a smaller starting lineup, even against somebody who obviously has size in Wembanyama. So they go Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson, Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet, and Jalen Green. They did not have Cam Whitmore last night, for what it's worth. We thought Jock Landale, would maybe be the obvious fill-in. He's kind of the only other real center on the roster. They do have Boban. Didn't even play a minute last night. So I think, any delusions of Boban joining the rotation without Sengun are probably dead. But Landale did play 26 minutes off the bench, 11 points, 5 assists, 4 boards, 2 steals, and a block. I'm interested in Landale, in a deeper league, especially, 14, 16 teams. I think he's probably worth grabbing. I think, there might be some nights in certain matchups where they do throw him in the starting lineup, but by default, he might be a 25, 30-minute guy. He also had 4 fouls last night. So, it's tough to say if that, may have impacted his minute ceiling. This is just a team that doesn't really have a whole lot of depth at center. They don't really have an avenue to add somebody at this point. I don't think they really care. And as we know, if you're just tuning in, Alperen Sengun, very unlikely to return at any point this season. Still on Sengun, though, somewhat good news, right? The injury, they ended up diagnosing it as a grade 3 ankle sprain, which kind of feels like a victory based on how that looked.
Oh my God. Yeah. When I first saw that, I thought, well, he's going to miss part of next season.
Right.
That was my first thought when he went down. So this is sucks for this year and for those that are entering the playoffs and we're relying on his production because he's probably been your best player or second best player. So it sucks that you lose that, but on the, for us in the fantasy community and those that rank, you don't have to really worry too much about Sengun and where you're going to place him next year. He should be fine. The Landale thing is interesting because I feel like they just threw him in there to beat up Victor Wembanyama last night, and he was able to mop up some stats on top of it. Wembanyama should have had a much bigger stat line going up against a lineup this small. I want to see this guy. He is extremely skilled. That goes without saying. Like his handles, his ability to shoot the 3, he step back, shoot 3s, his blocking around the rim. His skill is insane. Passing, you've detailed that here on this podcast, probably the most underrated part of his game. The thing that I haven't really seen him do enough of outside of a few highlights is bully ball. I want to see him go, you're going to put a guy who's 6'8" on me, really? And just take it to him. And he had the opportunity to do that last night against the smaller Houston Rockets lineup, and just didn't see that. That's the kind of progression that I want to see from Victor Wembanyama, because once he adds that part to his game, he'll be literally unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm out of superlatives when it comes to Wembanyama. I don't think we need to go down that road again and burn 10 minutes on me talking about why I'm taking him number one in fantasy next year. But you're right on the passing, man. I mean, 6 assists last night, and San Antonio went 11 of 36 from three. Like, he's leaving assists on the table every single night. And I was kind of going in and out of this game on League Pass. I saw a clip that somebody tweeted of Devin Vassell literally dribbling the entire possession and having like 4 opportunities to pass to Wembanyama and just like running into him and backing up. Like, it's still like a bad situation for Wembanyama, teammates wise, context wise, and he's still putting up these numbers. I think Wembanyama, like, you can get his assist prop most nights at like 3.5. I love that. Absolutely love that. And you're relying on some shaky shooting, I think, to come through on certain nights, but I do think the market is lagging behind a little bit when it comes to Wembanyama. And it was something that was discussed a little bit, coming into the draft, but everybody focused on the defensive potential, the jump shot, the handles. I think the thing that really separates, I think, the truly, truly elite players in the NBA is almost all those guys could pass, right? If you're going to be a top 5 player in the NBA, like, love DeMontis, or Smotis is a bad example because he could pass. I'm trying to think of who's like a points rebounds guy, or some of these big men who don't quite have that vision that Wembanyama has. It's like, I think to
Embiid.
Well, yeah, I mean, Embiid's assist numbers have been better. I think he's grown as a passer a lot. I think Giannis early in his career, you could say that, but he's improved a ton as a passer. I mean, these guys are top 5 players, so maybe it's a bad example, but I think Wembanyama has the elite vision that you just cannot teach. Like, that is, I'm a pretty firm believer, as somebody who's watched a lot of basketball, played a lot of basketball. That's you can't just teach someone to have that level of vision. You either have it or you don't early in your career.
Yeah, that's an innate trait. And that's what separates the uber greats, the LeBrons, Doncic, Jokic, now Victor Wembanyama very quickly. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Jock Landale. Those guys, there's a lot of talent in this league, but the guys that see the game 3 steps ahead and are able to set up their teammates and make guys around them better, that's what separates the guys that are really good from the guys that are among the league's best. And it's incredible that we're already having that conversation about Victor Wembanyama. If you're to start a franchise today, I know in fantasy you're already ready to take him number 1 in 2024's draft, but like, I don't know how many guys I would get through, if any, if I was starting a franchise today, just in general.
It's him. Right? I mean, yeah, you could say there's a case for Jokic, SGA. If you really want to throw Giannis in there, sure. But no, it's Wembanyama. If we were starting a league-wide fantasy draft right now, there is no way anybody but Victor Wembanyama would go number 1. Speaking of assists, by the way, I got to read off the stat. I looked this up the other night when I was watching the Nuggets, and it was because of MPJ was taking some insane shots, and I was just like, what is his assist rate? And his assist rate's actually not as bad as it was earlier in his career. But I then looked into like who had like the worst assist rate ever. 2014-15 Hassan Whiteside. This is peak Whiteside. LeBron's back in Cleveland. Heat are looking for something. They signed Whiteside. Hassan Whiteside played 1,142 minutes that season, and he had 6 total assists. 1 assist per 190 minutes played.
That's not great. He was the kind of guy. The second the second he would get the ball, that man was trying to put it in the rim every single time.
Yeah, he wasn't trying to pass. I'll tell you that.
No.
How do you not just find your way into like a half assist per game? That's crazy. 190 minutes per 1 assist.
Yeah, he was very one dimensional in the way that he approached the game. I think that's why it's what Miami was willing to move off of that, even though they overpaid him.
Yeah, well, he ended up in Sacramento. He always kind of felt like he was on the collision course to be a Sacramento King. All right, speaking of the Rockets rotation, Paul says, I picked up Thompson right after Sengun's injury. Not sure what to do with him after yesterday's performance, trying to stick with the give a player 3 games rule, which in general I think is a good strategy. But what do you guys think? So, it's tough with Sengun because obviously Landale is the one-to-one, positional. All right, makes sense. Some minutes would go to him type of fit. But, Amen could kind of play all over, right? I mean, he's played a ton of minutes at shooting guard, small forward, even power forward this season. So I think there is some trickle down there. And, he was back in the starting lineup for the first time in a month last night. Like you said, Paul, I didn't really do much. 23 minutes, 6 points, 4 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal. I would give it some time. I mean, he's one of those guys that it feels like every 2 or 3 games, he'll just give you like 6 combined steals and blocks. And I think that's really what's going to be most dependable with him. He's a great rebounder for his size and for his position eligibility. So I still think there's something here. I mean, what you do have to keep in mind though, is Cam Whitmore. But he's going to be out, for at least 3 weeks. So this could be a situation where we don't even see Whitmore again this season. So if Whitmore was coming back like later this week, I'd be a little more concerned. But I think because of that, you're going to have a longer runway here with Amen Thompson.
And this is where the Sengun injury could actually turn out to be a positive for the Houston Rockets because, and especially with the diagnosis of it not being that serious, but they are in developmental mode. They already know what they have in Alperen Sengun, and he's developed in a big way this year. I don't know that another month in the season was going to make him an extremely more improved basketball player from what we've already seen from him. Amen Thompson now gets an opportunity to slide into that starting lineup, and they're not just going to feed him, but he's going to have opportunities. And this is sometimes when we see rookies that have not really hit their stride yet, put together a few good games. I think this happened with Jabari Smith a bit last year where he just was struggling to find his spot. In the end of the year, they just said hoop, and he started to really put it together. I think Amen Thompson could be looking at something just like that.
Yeah, Jabari Smith is somebody I'm curious about too. I actually was hoping we'd see a little bit more of a boost from him last night. I mean, kind of a tough matchup. He was matched up with Wembanyama for a decent chunk of the night. We did still hit his points over on the RotoWire NBA show. That was 14.5. He got to 15. You would think that he's somebody that we saw last night. Slides up to center. He's already playing a decent amount of minutes, so we'll see if there's much more of a ceiling there. But Jabari Smith is tough because we talked about this a lot last year too. I mean, he's kind of a super role player, right? And we knew that going into the draft. He's not somebody who's going to command shots. He's not going to go get the ball and go one-on-one. And we know Dylan Brooks will do that. We know Fred VanVleet will do that. We know Jalen Green will do that. Cam Whitmore, when he's out there, one of the highest usage. Cam Whitmore has a higher usage rate than Paul George on the season, by the way. So I think Jabari Smith in some ways, he's kind of a victim of the situation. I'm still pretty in on him as far as what he can be long term, but I don't like the thought of him, just becoming a higher usage guy in the context of this Rockets roster. I don't know how realistic that's going to be. Christian says, "Good morning, fellas. Good morning, Christian. I need to trade away Lauri Markkanen in a points league. Yes, you do. Thoughts on some targets with high upside for silly season?" Yeah, I think a lot of people are in this situation, man. They're still going game to game with Markkanen. He missed his 4th straight last night with what is apparently just like a bruised quad. I think, the writing's been on the wall for a little bit here with Utah. I think they're okay, kind of backing their way out of this thing, trying to preserve their draft pick to the best of their ability. It's really tough to say if this is a shutdown. Like, I wouldn't be shocked either way. I mean, this would be a lot. They still have a decent chunk of games remaining, right? I mean, there's what, like 16, 17 games left, I believe, for them. So the fact, like, I wouldn't say Markkanen's just done for the year, but I think we're kind of in the Jaren Jackson zone with him, where it's like he could come back, play a few games. It's back to back. We'll sit out. Like, it's just not a situation that you want to be a part of. So if you can offload him, I will say you may have missed the window, as far as returning the type of value that you might want. But at the same time, I think there's still a way you can come out on top here. From a games played perspective. So where do we draw the line, Brandon, as far as like what zone of players should you try to be shopping in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been trying to come up with some names as you were going through that explanation, and it does seem like a really good time to move off of them would have been a few weeks ago. But now, if you're desperate to just find somebody that can give you something a little bit more reliable, I'm just looking at overall points, and guys like Austin Reeves been lighting it up as of late. I'm on his points, rebound, and assists over tonight. He's been really consistent, reliable. That could be a guy that, maybe he's not the star that Markkanen is, but he's been really reliable in terms of his production. That could be a guy you look at. Miles Turner, if somebody's willing to flip him, he's been blocking shots like crazy lately. And that Pacers defense has actually turned things around. That's just if you're in the need to offload.
If you could get Miles Turner, you got to do it. I don't think you can even, like, if anybody who's paying attention, I don't think they're giving you Miles Turner, right? I mean, that's a team that, like, they got to play this thing out. They're trying to avoid the play-in. I think Miles Turner is, like, too good right now for I think anybody you're trying to shop Markkanen to, they're going to know the same thing that we know, right? And be like, well, I don't even know if this guy's going to play again. Like, is he going to play 50% of the games the rest of the way?
Right.
I think you got to aim lower, to be honest. Jabari Smith, honestly, is a name who comes to mind. I think if you could get Jabari Smith at this point, I would think about it. You could try like the Precious Achua route. I know there's some concern that, once Julius Randle comes back, maybe his minutes decrease. Mitchell Robinson allegedly is still coming back at some point. Kelly Olynyk out there in Toronto. I mean, I truly think that's kind of the type of player you need to be looking for. Like these guys who rank, like 70 to 100. Like I really think you're going to have to take a pretty steep discount to get off of Markkanen right now.
I would prefer to go the 2-for-1 route rather than just give up on him like that in the case that he does come back, because, man, you're taking a bath if that's the case. I mean, you're probably right. Like, there's no reason for anybody to accept the deals that I just offer. I would start with that, wait for the decline, and then hit them with the reality.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, Paul says, 12-team 9-cat league. I currently have the following guys on waivers: Scoot, Amen, and Suggs. Do I drop any of those three to pick up these available players? Cam Johnson, Kyle Anderson, Bruce Brown, Andrew Nembhard, or Dereck Lively? That's interesting. Kyle Anderson's missed a game the other night. I'm not super enthused with him overall. Cam Johnson's missed the last three, but he is probable to play tonight, so he should be back in the mix. Had played well before his latest injury. I'll let you talk about Suggs. Is he somebody you'd consider dropping, or do you want to hold him?
No, he was out for a couple of games, but he's right back in the mix tonight. And the Magic, he's been playing. I'll give you a reason to feel good about Suggs. He has played infinitely better on the home floor. He is the energy guy. He brings the juice in the building, and he's just one of those, like a lot of role players, they play better in their home arena. The Magic play the rest of the month. They have one road game left in the month of March. So he is this could be his most productive month of the entire season. This is not the time to move off of him.
Okay. On Bruce Brown, he started the other night, and Toronto's down like everybody right now, and I think some of those guys are coming back, some aren't, but they were without Quickly, Trent, RJ Barrett's missing time. He's going to miss another game coming up with a personal issue. Obviously, Pirtle and Barnes are out. Boucher's going to miss time. So I've never really been a Bruce Brown guy. I've always thought he's been a little bit overrated, especially in terms of fantasy, but I think Toronto's just out of dudes, and he's going to play big minutes. So I think of those guys, Bruce Brown to me is probably the most appealing. I'm not a huge Nembhard guy. I know he's starting. I know he's playing minutes. He's very hit or miss night to night. Kyle Anderson, like we said, did not play on Sunday against the Lakers. Returned, played 29 minutes against the Clips last night. Looked okay. 10 points, 7 assists, 5 boards. He's not going to give you a ton of consistent defensive production. He's obviously not going to hit any threes. So in a category league, if you need assists, I think Kyle Anderson makes sense. If you're doing okay in assists, I would stay away.
Yeah. So the Scoot thing I still struggle with, because I just want to see so much more out of him. Ahmed Thompson, we just talked about him. I don't think this is the time to move off. They're going to give him a lot of runway. And Suggs, I think this would be one of the worst times of the year to move off of that particular player. He's going to give you the threes. He's been hitting those at a much higher rate this year. The steals will be there, and all of that ticks up at home. I really like Andrew Nembhard. I think that the way that Indiana is starting to play this, they got through that little rough spell after the All-Star break. I sat back and watched that Indiana Oklahoma City game. This is a completely different unit. They have finally really infused Pascal Siakam into this lineup, and they're starting to play some real defense too. And Andrew Nembhard is a big part of what they want to do right now, especially with Ben Mathurin not a part of the mix. They need all these other guys to step up, and I really like the way he's playing. So I would swap Scoot out for Nembhard and keep the other two.
All right, we got a question from loyal viewer Matt Carmody. Says, "Hey guys, would you drop Buddy Hield for Micic or Scoot in a head-to-head points league?" It says playoffs start next week. Yeah, I mean, Hield becomes less valuable in a points league. We know that, right? He's one of those guys who has like kind of the biggest difference between category and points league value, just because of the high volume threes. You know, he's been fine as a passer. You know, serviceable as a rebounder. It's not like he's Kyle Korver here. He does some other things, but I think it's a reasonable question in a points league for sure. I mean, Micic is so interesting. He's tethered so tightly to Trey Mann and LaMelo Ball, and I feel like we say this every week. I don't think LaMelo's coming back at this point, man. And if he does, you know, whatever. I mean, it's been such a long layoff. I don't really know what the point would be of bringing him back. Hasn't played since January 26th. They're kind of running out of time. They're playing out the string. You know, Trey Mann is questionable to return tonight. I think, you know, Micic could still have some value if one of those guys is back. Obviously, if LaMelo comes back, both Mann and Micic take a huge hit. But Micic has looked good, man. He started 5 in a row now. In that span, he's averaging 14, 6, and 4 with a steal. You know, doesn't do much from beyond the arc. He's not a good shooter, but in a points league, that doesn't matter as much. And then Scoot, on the other hand, you know, he's a better points league guy, right? He's kind of the anti-Hield because he's a terrible shooter. He turns it over a ton, but he is going to give you the counting stats. And I think they're going to unleash him going forward. So we've been saying this all year. There will be a time when it makes sense to roster Scoot Henderson. And this may be the time, especially in a points league. So I'll ask you, Buddy Hield or Scoot Henderson?
Yeah, I think I'd rather have Scoot. I can't quit this guy. All season long, I was way too in on him at the start of the season, and yeah, hell, we're into mid-March already, and there's still a debate to be had on this guy. I've been too in on him for too long to hop off that bandwagon right now. But yeah, Micic has been really good. He's led the team in points or assists on either one or the other, sometimes both on numerous occasions over the last several nights. And they still have 3 games left this week. Next week, though, just to, you know, if you've got to set your lineup for a full week, they only play twice. They've had a game on Tuesday and Saturday, so they get a bunch of time off after this week. Something to consider for those. There's a reason why I was looking at the article that you guys put out this past Sunday. The waiver wire guys was like the entire Hornets roster, and Micic was part of that, and he's delivered.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where we're at right now at this point in the season. Good question here from Dennis. 3 games of Lively or Royce O'Neal this week? I think I would go Lively. You know, the Dallas front court is still kind of messy. It's like all 3 of Washington, Gafford, and Lively are all playing minutes now. And Gafford, by the way, I mean, we left him for dead a week and a half ago when he was playing like, you know, 11 minutes a game. He has since gone 28 for 28 from the field over his last 4 games. 28 for 28 from the field. I will repeat. Coming off of one of his better games of the season. I mean, last 3 games, he started and averaged 16, 7, and 2.5 blocks. But Lively, you know, returned against Chicago the other night and had a huge game in his own right. I mean, that was a blowout. So, you know, Mavericks ended up winning that by, I think, 35. He had 22 points on 11 of 12 shooting. You know, I think there are certain nights where one of those guys is going to be squeezed out. You know, maybe it's Washington, given that he's been the guy who's played worse over the last couple of weeks. But I personally would favor Lively over O'Neal. I think he's going to give you a higher floor. I think he's got a pretty good matchup at home tonight against the Warriors. Another good matchup tomorrow against an OKC team that also lacks size.
Yeah, I think this comes down to which team do you trust more. I have no idea what Brooklyn's doing this time of year, so I kind of want to get out of that business. And
Royce O'Neal's on the Suns. Bad news.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I have. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I'm sorry. I was looking at his Brooklyn numbers.
Like if you want to trash the Nets, that's totally fine. I'm not sure how that's relevant, but
Oh man, I got to brush up on my deadline news.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but either way, Dereck Lively was still going to be my. Either way, Dereck Lively was going to be my choice here. Both of these guys are going to give you games where you get absolutely nothing, but Lively seems to be more part of the mix of what Dallas wants to do moving forward, and you're going to get that sort of rotation where Daniel Gafford is going to get his, but. I still think, in terms of consistency, Dereck Lively is bringing it more so than Royce O'Neal, formerly of the Brooklyn Nets.
All right, we have a question on Jaren Jackson. Is he going to be shut down soon? My Yahoo League trade deadline is already over, so maybe a drop. Our question asker says he's representing the Taiwanese fans, by the way. So thank you. We are a global show. We strive to be, and we appreciate the support there. Yeah, definitely a shutdown candidate. I think Jaren Jackson and Lauri Markkanen are basically in the exact same zone right now. They actually have the same injury as well. Jaren Jackson's been a little bit more consistently in the lineup, but if you look at, really the last month since the start of February, it's like missed 2 games, play 4, missed 1, plays 3, missed 3, play 3. Didn't play last night against Washington. They're saying now that he's going to be questionable for tonight's game against Charlotte on a back-to-back. After that, they don't have another back-to-back until the second to last week of the season. So I think Jackson's still going to be in and out of the lineup. I do think there's a decent chance that they just completely pull the plug at the end of the year. But we also got news earlier this week that Desmond Bane is apparently planning to return at some point. So it's like if you're bringing Desmond Bane back to play a handful of games at the end of the year, it's like it doesn't really line up that you would shut Jaren Jackson down.
I kind of love this Memphis Grizzlies team right now. They had every reason, and maybe they've tried and just been unsuccessful, to completely pack it in and do everything that they can possibly do to lose basketball games. They are so competitive night to night, more so than some of the other teams that we should be saying this about. They are a scrappy group, and I think there's sort of like a culture. It has to be a culture thing within the organization. What that tells me is they're not as interested in the shutdown guy as some of these other teams, like we've been worrying about Portland all year. I don't think they're going to get into that business. If a guy can play, he can play. They're not going to throw somebody out there who's not ready. But yeah, I mean, I've gained a lot of confidence in what Memphis is doing, and I don't even know if it's smart, but I respect their approach, because this is a team that, as somebody who bets the NBA night to night, you can still bet the Grizzlies, and that's not something you can say about a lot of bottom dwellers.
It's not for the faint of heart, I'll tell you that. Especially when they're
tough.
playing teams like Charlotte and Washington. It's like, good luck figuring that out. But yeah, I mean, they've been about as competitive as they could be, despite fielding half of a G League roster.
Yeah.
Washington last night, by the way, was a road favorite in Memphis for the first time all season. First time all year, Washington had been a road favorite, and they ended up losing that game by double digits. I want to finish on this. Which team? We get a lot of questions this time of year about shutdowns, rotations, things of that nature. Obviously, all the teams that are in the play-in mix and above, I think those teams are good. It's like at the end of the year, it's like if Boston's up 8 games in the East, yeah, like maybe they get Tatum and Brown take a couple games off, but not really worried about that. Of the teams that are below the play-in zone, who do we trust? Who do we not trust? I think Portland, Memphis, Utah, those are the 3 that have kind of been a thorn in our side. I think Charlotte's in that mix, but you talk about a team like Memphis still being competitive, still playing out the string, still trying to bring someone like Desmond Bane back. What do we think about Toronto, Detroit, Washington? Are we worried about any shutdowns there?
Yeah, I mean, I think Detroit, you have to be. It would be so foolish for them to do that, though. They're bad with whoever they throw out there, so I don't think it's really all that necessary. They need to develop. Portland would definitely be. We've been worried about that. They might be at the front of the list. Utah, we talked about them. They're definitely one of those teams. It wouldn't shock me with Brooklyn. That's why I brought them up before. This is a team that right now is they're 3.5 games back on a play-in spot. They're kind of going nowhere fast, and I don't think it would take many more losses for them to just say, let's pack it in. And Mikal Bridges, maybe we don't see him for the rest of the year. I can't see really Toronto doing it. They don't feel like the kind of organization that goes that route.
Toronto, I worry about a little bit. For one, they have the injuries that, I think once Scotty Barnes went down, it was like,
does that count as a shutdown though?
Not really. But I think an injury like that kind of gives you carte blanche as an organization to be like, all right, well, our hands are tied. What are we going to do? And as we mentioned on the show a number of times, they owe a top 6 protected pick to the San Antonio Spurs. That would be, even in this draft, which everybody says is bad, and I'm telling you, it's not going to be that bad. You don't want to just hand over the 6th pick. I don't care. Like, there's not a single draft where you're just like, yeah, whatever. We don't want this lottery pick. And I think that's something that they're going to be cognizant of going forward.
Who could they shut down though? Like, if it's Scotty Barnes is the only one that we would consider.
Quickly, Barrett. I don't know, man. I mean, I'm just saying, like, they are right now. They have the 7th worst record, and they're basically tied with the Memphis Grizzlies for that. Like, they want to get to 6 if they can. I know it's a difference of like 4 percentage points or whatever, but that matters. Like, holding on to that pick, I think for Toronto right now would be pretty huge. Whether you want to use it, whether you want to trade it, whatever. I think if I'm Toronto, I'm doing everything I can to give myself the best odds to not send the number 6 pick to the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that sort of information is, that's invaluable this time of year. I just don't know that they really. There's some teams that just don't need to put in extra work to be where they need to be. Is RJ Barrett really worth? How many wins is RJ Barrett worth? I'm just not overly concerned. I think that Scotty Barnes, worrying about we may have seen the last of Scotty Barnes. I think that is that would be a fair assessment. I mean, that's it. That's the beauty of the play-in tournament. You have teams that are, hovering around that 9-10 range in the East and the West, and like, we're not even considering them. Those teams want to be involved, all of them.
Yeah, you're right. All right, we'll end on this. Good question from Matt. He says, do you think Luka will be suspended in the fantasy playoffs? He has 2 more technical fouls left. It's not. We go through this every year, I feel like, at the end of the season with Luka, where, a lot of guys reach that, like, they get right close to that threshold, and then they can somehow, keep their tempers under control. It's something to monitor. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Like, I certainly wouldn't be like trying to trade Luka because I'm worried he might be suspended for a game because of techs. I mean, Dallas is one of those teams that needs to win games to try to stay out of the play-in. So I think, Luka can be a bit of a hothead at times, but I think he can get it under control. And I just don't think there's a whole lot we could do fantasy-wise, right? It's like it's something that's in the back of your mind, but I'm not trying to get off of Luka Doncic because of that fear.
Yeah, I have a tough enough time predicting how these games are going to go. I definitely can't predict who's going to get teed up. And Luka doesn't feel like he's not like a Draymond Green hothead who actually loses his cool. Luka Doncic is very calculated in the way that he complains, and then sometimes he gets teed up because of it. If he knows that he's got a suspension looming, he'll dial it back. I think it's more like Euro complaining than anything else. It's like he grew up watching soccer, so he knows what that life is like.
All right, thanks for all the good questions in the chat, guys. We're going to wrap it up here. We will have Dr. Ray and Rick Kamla back at you tomorrow afternoon. Actually, probably tomorrow around noon Eastern. You can keep an eye out for them. We'll have the Waiver Wire episode on Friday. Shannon, Ken, and Alex Barutha. Brandon, you'll be stopping by the XM show later this week. Tomorrow, we're going to have you on to talk some hoops. Alex Barutha is going to join us later today. So check that out on SiriusXM Fantasy. You can hear me and Alex every night on SiriusXM NBA, 7 p.m. Eastern on the RotoWire NBA show. And make sure you go over to the RotoWire NBA Twitter. Check out Brandon's PrizePicks. Really trying to build that out. Check out rotowire.com/picks for all your research needs. And once again, we're sponsored by SmartBracket. If you're putting together a bracket next weekend, obviously the NCAA tournament getting underway, check out smartbracket.io.